Misfit Social Podcast. Good to see your lovely faces. Royce, somehow you and I are almost twinking.
That brings me joy.
Yeah?
We're like twinsies today.
And Paul is wearing the double denim, looking good.
Hey, man. That's right.
Dapper Dan over here.
You have a Filson sponsor or what?
No, but we could work on it.
Yeah, I think maybe we should.
It's a
I
beautiful
like the jacket.
Yeah. They make a good product.
I might break into spontaneous combustion here in a minute, though. It's
Yeah,
a little warm.
you're starting to sweat a little bit.
Little
Yeah.
Seattle representation.
Maybe you can get Will to turn the heat down.
I went this morning to a pretty cool coffee shop on the south side.
Yeah, we noticed that. Did you see my text?
Yeah, I was going to bring y'all. I thought about y'all.
You did.
But the early bird gets the worm, brother. I came down here about 8 o'clock and went over to that coffee shop.
Well, I mean, we could have come with, but there wasn't an invite or an offer to get any coffee.
Yeah.
Well, that's how that works.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
at least we know where you're at.
I needed some alone time. I've been with people like you guys all week. I just needed to be alone for a minute.
Man, just tell us how you really feel.
I did.
Okay.
I needed coffee and just me.
All right, well, let's talk cars for just a second.
All right.
Yeah.
Favorite car, Royce, of all time? If you let's say it like this. If you don't have a budget and you're like, hey, I can just pick any car that I can drive on the street, no matter what the price is, what are you getting?
You know, that dial could move for me any given day, but because of the project that my dad and I had, my dad was an old muscle car guy, so just hot rods. I grew up at drag races. He didn't take me hunting, but I could smell gasoline for most of my youth. Or nitro.
Nitro.
Yeah, it was
baby.
just, I remember
no smell like nitro.
Yeah, my dad would put me, I saw Big Daddy Don Garlits, in the flesh, and I remember my eyes burning from nitromethane.
Oh, yeah.
Like 10, 11 years old, and I'm like, yeah, this is awesome.
Sitting on a bomb.
So with all that said, I would say the first thing that pops into my head is a 67 Camaro, tricked out, rally stripes. We even did a project, was working on it before he passed, but it was never fully materialized. But
yeah.
I still would love to do that. Love to have that.
That's a great choice. Paul?
So if I could have two, both of them would be from the 60s. One would be a 60s Porsche, anything.
Okay. Just pick. Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then quirky is like a cab over GMC or Chevy or Ford van, those old vans that were like the cab over.
Yeah.
Just quirky weird.
Okay.
I just love them. Yeah.
What about yours, Cliff?
I would probably be between the Ferrari 488 Pista or the McLaren P1. I'd probably be between those two.
You guys thought I was going to pick the Model T? Is that what?
Well,
I thought it was going to be more like a horse and buggy.
Horse and buggy.
Yeah, it's like the original 1 horsepower.
I did mean to send you this picture that I saw in the parking lot today.
What's that?
Can you not see it?
Oh, your walker. Laying out in the...
It was in a gas station. I pulled it.
Fell out of the back.
Well, the reason why I wanted to talk about cars is because we got a very special guest today. Our guest with us today is BC, and he is a car guru.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, he has so many accolades around whether it's driving, working, building, fabbing. I would need a cheat sheet in front of me to keep up with all of his qualifications. So BC's coming to us live from Las Vegas. He's at a trade show. And BC, you're looking quite dapper today.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. And it's an honor to be here and part of this interaction.
So BC, tell us a little bit about your history with cars and how'd you get into cars? You're from Nigeria.
That is correct.
Just give us a little bit of the history of cars in Nigeria and the USA and who BC is and how you got where you're at today.
No worries. And before I even begin, I would love to ask, how crazy could I go? In other words, there are a lot of things that we did in the automotive community that I'm not so proud of, but allowed me to really succeed in this realm as well. So I don't know if you want to go into detail with that, but So just let me know. You can stop me if I get a little too crazy.
Tell us the crazy. We want to hear
tell us the
crazy.
tell us the crazy, because this is the Misfit podcast.
Right. That's how Elon Musk goes.
If it's crazy, we like it. Let's go.
More Misfit, the better.
My parents shared with me, of course, growing up. I don't remember this, but first word as a child was car, which is pretty interesting. Second word was light. Now, it didn't make sense because I just, at night, my dad said I'd see a car and say, car light, car light. It's kind of weird. That was my second word because I'm doing a lot more with electrons nowadays than I used to, but we'll get into that a little bit later. So growing up in Nigeria, West Africa, academia was quite important. So I come from a family of scientists. My dad is a very accomplished geologist and has his doctorate. My mom was a brilliant biochemist, and they still live in Nigeria, just great individuals. And so my entire family, I have 3 brothers and 3 sisters, and we all are, in essence, science majors. Me being the firstborn, I decided, because of my appeal for everything mechanical, to be an engineer. And because I loved science so much, studied very hard when I was in primary school and secondary school, knew what I wanted to do, and skipped quite a few grades because of my my prowess with academia. At the time, and I heard that it's already shattered by now. At the time, I noticed that to enter university in Nigeria, to have a good curriculum, whether you want to study medicine or engineering or law, you had to have very high marks in this one examination that only is allowed to be explored once a year. And if you fail, you have to wait another year to take this examination to get into university. It's called the JAMB, Joint Admissions Matriculation Board exam. Well, I took it when I was 14 just to get an idea of how it is. So that when I get to the American equivalent of 12th grade, in later my teens, I could pass with ease. Well, at 14, I took it and passed for engineering. So I was, at the time, in my country, the youngest person to enter university at the age of 15 to study petrochemical engineering at the time. Didn't learn much because the technology back home was quite ancient. So something I did leave out from earlier, both my parents went to school in the United States to study their curriculum, and felt it was ideal for me to follow in their footsteps. So had the opportunity in 1988, 89 to travel to the United States from Nigeria after 1 year of engineering in Nigeria. And a family met me at LAX at the airport in Los Angeles with a sign saying BC, and I went with them. They were friends of my father. He worked with them in the oil company realm. My dad was in America for a while under a Gulf Oil sponsorship.
Sure.
Someone mentioned Porsches before. So he was able, with a scholarship from Gulf Oil, to do well. So he had a lot of friends in the lubricants industry. You may know a company by the name of Torco.
Yes.
Big time Bob and Connie Lancaster were the owners of that entity. And they're the ones who took me in when I came to the United States.
Amazing.
To just have a great time studying engineering. And I continued, graduated quite well. However, the Lancasters ended up moving from Whittier, California to Jackson Hole, Wyoming. And I visited there once. It was really cold and uncomfortable. And I decided I wanted to stay in LA.
A little bit different than Nigeria, yeah?
Yeah, very, very, very polar opposite from where I was from subtropical, tropical sub-Saharan Africa to Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Anyway, I ended up staying. So my father said, okay, I called my dad, say, hey, Dad, the Lancasters are moving. I'm already here, at Cal State Long Beach. I want to stay here. He's like, son, I got you. There is a wonderful family that I know in this community in LA. This place was amazing. Beautiful Jewish community, very quiet, lovely area. You will be able to study and focus, staying with this family, no problem. Gentlemen, do you know what city that was that my father had in mind? Compton. In the 60s,
Nice, quiet.
60s, when my dad was in school in the United States. Yes, Compton was a beautiful Jewish community. Fast forward to the late 80s, early 90s.
Oh, yeah. Straight out of Compton, baby. Straight out of Compton.
Exactly. And he had no clue. So, and this pivot is quite influential to my appeal with motorsports. So I meet with the family, great area, but this lady, Mrs. Jones, who I refer to as my guardian, she was one of those ladies that no matter what happened in her neighborhood, she was not moving. If it goes downhill, she bought this house. This is her house. She's not going anywhere. So as things start to degrade in Compton from the 60s, she stayed right there. And I saw it all. I saw it all. I never had exposure to the Crips or the Bloods or any of that stuff when I was in Africa. I came here and it's just an eye opener. I experienced the riots right there, people looting, fires. It was crazy. I saw it all.
Because sorry to interrupt you, BC, but that would have been about the Rodney King time, correct?
Exactly, 100%. That was the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I was in university. I think I don't know what class. I think it was OChem. I was in organic chemistry class at Long Beach, and they shut the campus down, told us to go home. I'm driving back on the 91 freeway, and you get to see fires and smoke everywhere. It's pretty crazy. But why is this important? Compton had this underbelly that was just rooted in street racing. And as an engineering student, and I had my little Honda CRX as my first student car that I was driving around with, and I started to modify them a little bit because a lot of my engineering peers started like do exhaust systems and so on and so forth. I noticed that some of those guys at night would go to Compton Boulevard or Alameda or some of the warehouses near Mansville in Wilmington and street race all night for big money. And me being curious, I went one night and I was hooked. And I took the time to try and figure out. Now, by the way, I'm talking early 90s, right? So you couldn't call a Bisimoto, the company I own, and buy parts. There was really nothing available. There was no eBay, no Amazon. There was
it was hard to get stuff then. Yeah.
Yeah, you couldn't. And if you wanted to modify your Honda at the time, there were very few options. There was AEM or Jackson Racing. But for me to be able to succeed and street race and do well, I had to tap into the resources I had around me, which are people who are doing quite well in the domestic scene. So you think of individuals like John Conciati from AEM, Ed Iskandarian from ISKI, Nick Arias from Arias Pistons. These are people I met and they really took me under their wing and taught me the ropes when it came to modification of hot rods. And me just transferring that data to my Honda. For example, valve springs. Ed Iskandarian was able to help me with some inner springs for my Chevy as my major springs for my single cam Honda. And it worked quite well. But there were Chevy components in my Honda.
That's nuts.
Cut down valves and then Nick Ayers helped me my first set of forged pistons. And it was just great to learn, explore, and not be afraid of the unknown because we had no books, no guidance, nothing whatsoever. I would read maybe David Vizard's How to Build Horsepower books or something from Power Secrets from Smokey Yunick. I would read those, but it wasn't Honda specific. It was like more, small block, big block Chevy, Fords, but the technology did transfer over. So that made me quite successful. And guys, I'm telling you, when I say street racing got me through college, I mean it. It did.
So you won some races then.
What was that?
You won some races then for sure.
A ton, quite a bit. I had a small single overhead cam engine, a 1.5 liter. I modified it to 18-to-1 compression. Got that thing finally to run 10.7s, natural aspirated in a quarter mile. Broke a ton of records with that. Did well. I was the young African kid who just loved tinkering and playing with things myself and doing well at street races. But I wasn't hardcore enough to talk crap and smack to get money, a lot of money. So I had a group of guys around me who would just approach me. One good story, if you don't mind me sharing, is
bring it.
When I won $5,000, I'm talking about $5,090 racing in Wilmington. So what happened one evening is we didn't have, of course, forums at the time or cell phones were around, but they're very expensive, $3 a minute. You couldn't really call people and talk quite a bit. Our watering hole was the AOL chat rooms, believe it or not. Okay. So there was a chat room known as Import Racing, Japan Import Racing. So we'd go there, we'd hang out, and we'd talk crap or, have fun and talk about things, about car-related, items. But we also set up street races there. So I got called out by this one guy, Tom Young, we ended up being friends afterwards, to race for the fastest single cam street. And he was natural aspirated, fuel injected, 1.6. I was twin Mikuni side draft carbureted, 1.5 liter high compression big cam engine. And we line up And as we're talking about prices, by the way, a typical race would be $100, couple $100 is big money. He said $5,000. And guys, I had never even seen $5,000 before in one lump sum, let alone racing for it. This one kid comes up to me and says, "Hey, my name is John, brother. I got you," and gives me $5,000
Oh,
at the
holy
street
crap.
races. And a teenager, right? And I'm like, "Oh, okay." So I race with this guy. We line up, do our burnout stage. We launch. He just smokes me out the hole. But even though I didn't have great traction, by second gear, I caught him. Third gear, I passed him. Fourth gear, it was over. Quarter mile was over.
Yes.
And we won. So I get this 10 grand. I give to him, and he says, no. You keep the winnings. Just give my $5,000 back. And that was the crazy race I did right there in Wilmington. And John and I have been friends ever since. He ended up being my crew chief when I started racing pro with Honda, which was pretty good. I quit street racing because I saw a mishap in Ontario where someone passed away, and I cold turkey stopped street racing.
Yeah.
And started doing a lot more at the local tracks in Fontana and Pomona, and then got approached by scouts from American Honda. They loved my demeanor and how I carried myself and how fast I was. They asked me to race for them semi-pro, and that's how I began my journey with the OEMs.
Oh, wow.
Racing for them and drag racing and breaking records.
So it occurs
So
to
I'm sorry
me.
it was a long story. I'm sorry.
No, that's good.
There was some good things that will get your listeners to get a better feel of where I'm from and how I came to experimenting and playing around with everything automotive.
So at what point did you come clean with your parents?
It took a while. I would say a podcast like this is what my dad heard in the 2000s. Like, he knew I was racing a little bit because he'd see magazines from time to time, but the street racing stuff, he had no clue.
Yeah.
He would have brought me right back home. He would not tolerate that at all. It would have been a problem. You would never have met me. It would have been very
That's right. That's wild. So at what point was that just common conversation for real? Like,
I would say the racing stuff probably when I went home in 2008.
oh my
I
goodness.
had a stack of magazines and say, "Hey, Father, I went home. We went to our upstairs in our veranda. They live in a city known as Aba. And we're sitting down like, Dad, I have all these magazines. I want to show you something." So I'm showing him the Turbo magazine, Sport Compact Car, Super Street, Honda Tuning, Import Tuner, all these variety of magazines depicting me racing and winning and breaking records. And he was like, "Son, I knew the whole time. I kind of figured it. I knew. I heard through the grapevine what you were doing."
But it took you 15 it took you more than 15 years to come clean.
It did. But African parents, they're strict disciplinarians.
Yeah.
They don't mess around. So
It was genuine.
Found out and in a bad way and was vexed, he would have summoned me back home, and it would have been a whole different story.
Yeah, there's real fear in that situation.
So, BC, I have a car question. Yeah. So I grew up, I started driving in like 93, 94,
right.
And I was a Ford Mustang guy, rear wheel drive, started doing some work to the engine, and to hear you say 18-to-1 compression, like, yeah, I had a skip.
On a Honda.
I had a skip in my brain because a Ford can't run like above like 11-to-1 compression. So kind of, I mean, I know a little bit about engines, but clearly not enough. How is that possible? Like, how do they get that higher compression and not have it just completely come apart?
That's a great question. And even, once again, experimentation is what got me to where I need to go. The engines I play around with start up with like 9-to-1.
Yeah.
If you're lucky, you get a 9.5-to-1 setup from factory. And because of the small camshafts, it just can't tolerate much. Static compression is one thing, but dynamic is really what makes things work very well. So the compression that happens with the camshaft cycle involved is what allows you to get away with things. So whether it's a Ford or a Honda, if you go up in compression, there gets to a point where you can get to diminishing returns where you don't see that much gain in power, but it's really hard to keep things not to detonate. The one way to kind of trick things to where you can make the high compression, create the power, and not have issues is with camshafts. With huge camshafts and a lot of overlap, your dynamic is not as high. In other words, when it compresses, it bleeds off because of the massive overlap between the intake and exhaust valves staying open at the same time.
Okay.
So you can cheat a little bit by getting the top end power you need with the camshafts allowing to breathe, the compression allowing you to generate the heat that's controllable to make a lot of power. The only caveat is your idle will be rubbish.
Yeah.
And it's hard to leave the line. Like at lower RPMs, it just doesn't want to get out of this way because you're bleeding out a lot of compression and it doesn't have that much power down low.
I got you.
Up top, I kept going up in compression. I start out with, 10 to 1, 12 to 1 I was at 12.5 for a long time. 13, 14, kept seeing power increases, especially as I put bigger camshafts. And then when I started getting to 17 to 1, playing around with the guys from Arius, I noticed because these engines are Econobox engines, there's not a lot of attention to detail with the castings. I noticed that if you make a high compression piston, it could clear maybe 2 combustion chambers, but the third one with a dome would hit. So when I got to 18 to 1, I literally, in my kitchen, in my apartment, would massage each piston for each combustion chamber and number them accordingly.
Oh,
to
wow.
get that compression I needed for the heat of combustion that allows me to make power, and then have some really deep plunge depths in my valve pockets to allow for the larger cams. And it's a perfect win-win. Then couple that with, since we didn't have much fuel injection advancements at the time, with side drop carburetors, that beautiful cloud that you can see with the optimization of fuels, which, by the way, a whole separate test I did in school that almost got me kicked out of college. I was trying to understand what happened. I did a little experiment in college to see why I was making more power with carburetors than injection at the time, whole separate sidebar. But I was able to, with that, create a lot of power and then break a lot of records. It was just, as I think back, gentlemen, I don't think the racing was a crazy fun for me. I think it was the experimentation.
Yeah,
racing
sounds
was a good
like
way
it.
to test my experiments. I enjoyed figuring things out more than anything else, and still do.
Yeah, that's awesome. So just now you got my curiosity up again about the carb versus fuel injection.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, give me a quick rundown on how you were,
Sure, no problem,
your thoughts
no
on that.
problem.
What's your theory on that?
So as I started to become popular around these, street racing realms, we started developing these kind of cliques or teams, not gangs, teams. And so we had this opportunity to notice that on the dyno, we had the Dyno Jet 246s at the time, once we switched over to carburation, even with the same amount of flow as we test on a flow bench, we were seeing up to 10% improvement in power. And I want to find out why. Well, without boring you with the grim details, I did an experiment in school where I determined that the injectors we had access to had a spray pattern that didn't really atomize the fuel quite nicely.
Yeah.
They came out in droplets. While carburetors, when I created a vacuum situation in lab where I put about 10 inches of mercury and then used saline as my fuel, so I didn't want anything to get combust and have a fire occur in school, I noticed that instead of a spray coming out of the nozzle like injectors, it was a cloud that formed, like a nice mist that came out. So since it was able to atomize quite nicely and burn cleanly, it made more power because the droplets from the fuel injection would absorb the heat of combustion. So instead of, you guys got me started now.
He's getting fired up.
Yeah. Gasoline engines are nothing but energy converters. They really are. They take chemical energy from the fuel and the oxygen in the air, convert to heat energy through combustion, and then mechanical energy that transfers to the piston, then the crankshaft, all that fun stuff. Whenever you reduce the heat that happens with combustion, you lose power. You want to be able to create the heat, as much controllable heat as possible to do more work on the piston. When you have injectors and they have thick droplets of fuel, it absorbs that heat. When you combust it, some of that heat gets absorbed by the droplets of fuel to help even atomize better. If you have a fine mist, you don't lose that heat. You burn evenly and you create more power. And that is what I discovered. As a lab tech walked in, saw me, reported to the dean, and they're going to kick me out of Long Beach. And I cried and begged for them to keep me on campus. Told them my experiment. He was proud, but he said you can't do illegal experiments in school. So that's how I found out. But it helped me understand what was going on and why my carburation was so advantageous. Fast forward years later, I meet Jim Kinsler at PRI. We hit things off, and then he gives me access to more injection technology where I was able to flow a lot more fuel for more exotic fuels, but also use injectors that could actually atomize as finely, if not better, at high pressures than carburation. And that's what we use today.
Awesome. That was going to be my next question. So if there's improvement in the delivery of the injector, then could you get that same equivalent? It sounds like they've increased that technology today
Absolutely.
where you can, it's maybe even exceeded what you could get from the carburation.
That is correct. When we started playing around with exotic fuels, ethanols, methanol, all these other fuels, the carburetors had a limitation, not only with jet sizing that we can have available, but emulsion tubes. So we just couldn't flow enough fuel through some of the carburetors to make big power. And that's when we had to switch over to injection. But to help, another experiment I did years ago, to help with trying to create that beautiful fuel optimization, if you look at any of my drag race intake manifolds, first I made of magnesium, which is quite expensive but lightweight. You notice I have stage injectors. So I have primary injectors closer to the head.
Yep.
And then farther away, just like Formula One, I have this tree that's maybe almost a foot and a half apart from the head with other injectors. Because the farther away you go from the nozzle of a modern day fuel injector, the finer the mist. So I was able to program through very clever ECU tuning the opportunity to have the primary injectors come in at low RPM. And then high RPM, where we have a lot of fun, it weans off and the upper injectors come in. And the reason why I do that is because at low RPM, remember I talked about earlier about camshafts and overlap?
Right.
You can have flames coming out.
Yep.
And you don't want to use the secondary injectors with a lot of overlap at low RPM because the flames come out and help burn the car down. So you don't want that.
Right.
So you have to be clever with science and make things work properly.
You know, it occurs to me that a lot of the technology that ends up on the production line starts in racing.
Absolutely.
Or possibly in economy. I wonder where the percentage is, you know, people searching for economy or searching for, you know, these high end. I wonder what your take is on how that ends up in manufacturing.
Well, it's well known that whether you're looking at Formula One, NASCAR, whatever type of racing that's really advanced, a lot of that, yes, is very entertaining and it helps create opportunity and awareness for brands, for automotive brands. But a majority of the time, that technology trickles down to the street. Whether it's what we take advantage of now in internal combustion engines and Hondas with VTEC, and Porsche does it as well with their VarioCam. All that stuff came from racing initially and trickled down. With modern day direct injection, Formula One as well. We are able to run leaner fuel mixtures, make a lot more power, get better fuel economy. So whether you're looking at winning races or getting better fuel mileage, it's all about efficiency, right? And that's what we're doing. We're all on the same page. And it actually works hand in hand. It's quite nice indeed. Quite nice.
Is that where you find yourself being pulled at as a consultant some?
Absolutely. 100% of the time. Whether it's working with our OEM partners from Honda to Hyundai to Porsche, we're constantly working with them and sharing with them some insights, which brought me into something that we could probably get into a little bit later. I'm playing a lot more with electrification nowadays, and that was a whole different beast. And one that's exciting and also quite terrifying at the same time.
Yeah.
That's my question.
Yeah.
Is so I'm still stuck on a 10.5 second overhead cam, but we're gonna move on.
On a Honda.
I want to see that.
It got better. That was my smaller engine. That was the 10.7 was with my 1.5 liter. When I graduated to a 2.2 liter single cam, I ended up getting to 9.2.
Oh my god! He has a 9-second Honda.
Yeah.
Scalded
154
dog.
miles an hour.
That is a
front wheel drive.
I don't want to be in that
I need
vehicle.
to see that, and I need that.
I want to
many
be in that
videos.
vehicle.
I
Yeah.
can force you guys, it's great. I have in-car videos, out-car. It's great stuff.
I got to see it.
The technology, we did so many great things. We had wheelie bars on it. People are like, why do you have wheelie bars?
Yes.
It helped the weight transfer. It was just great stuff. We just
Yeah.
did some really crazy, amazing things that I'm quite proud of.
So how do you make the transition? Because man, everything you've been sharing is just amazing. So how do you make the transition? And I'm still reminded of that young boy who said car and light.
Yeah.
How does it go from, petroleum-based fuels to electricity in your story? Would love to hear
Great
that.
question. Today, as you shared with your listeners, I'm in Las Vegas for the annual Consumer Electronics Show, CES here in Vegas. One of our partners, Hyundai, years ago, introduced us to a team from Harman Kardon. I don't know if you know the entity Harman. Yep. They own JBL and some other brands. Just very big audio-based organization. They were acquired recently by Samsung, and they're here as well. But long story short, in Vegas in 2016, we built a 700 horsepower Hyundai Tucson for them. In normal BC fashion, it was fuel injected, airbag, beautiful blue color, white wheels, my kind of signature turbo sticking out the hood, and then it was chock full of their audio technology. They gave me and the team access to this CES convention, and I walked around, gentlemen. I saw all of my partners I worked with for years, Hyundai, Ford, Honda. They were all here. The booths were amazing, looking bigger and better than anything I could see at SEMA, which is our automotive aftermarket show. I didn't even recognize any of the PR people there because it's a whole different division. A lot more resources here. And I said, hey, I probably need to look into the kind of cars they're bringing to this show because they're all electric. And even though, gentlemen, I have to even shift how I'm sitting now. I was such a huge anti-EV individual at the time. I didn't want anything to do with it. If any of you came to my shop in 2016 and said, hey, I have this electric car, could you come hang out? I'll tell you to leave my shop. I was really, at every forum and opportunity I had to talk about performance, if anyone brought up electric cars, I would say they're dumb, it has no soul, quiet for tree huggers, people who wear hemp sandals. This is a stupid.
Sandals.
It is not for. It's not for me. It's stupid. That was my take, and I was viciously vocal about it. Fast forward to me in 2016. I come out here to Vegas. I go to CES. I see all these electric cars in my partner's booths. My budgets were getting cut every year on the petrol side, and these guys have booths that look ridiculous. And I reluctantly said, if I need to continue to service my technical partners, whether I like it or not, I need to learn this technology. So
that's like Bob Dylan leaving the festival and going electric.
Yeah, I was just like, I need to figure this out. So I don't know how much time we have, but there's a very interesting story that I can share to why I chose my first electric car.
We're good, BC. We're good on time. You go as long as you need to go. I think you've got more of a hard stop than we do.
And I'll try not to get the company in trouble. But there's a big organization that I'm sure we all know. They do a lot of filtration. I'll say that. I may have said too much already. I've built cars for this company for the auto shows for quite a few years. I built a few Porsches, a few Hondas. They're always hits in their booth. But in normal SEMA fashion, sometimes fabrication takes a while, paint, interior, and you end up finding yourself working nonstop days leading up to the convention, and that's very uncomfortable. So in 1 year, there's a gentleman by the name of Phil who's head of marketing for said organization, and we're at SEMA, and we're planning for the next year, and he said, hey, BC, I want you to build me a twin-turbo Porsche 935, which I kind of hinted I wanted to do that for them. And he said, okay, and we shook on it, and we had a budget in mind. And instead of me waiting for the resources to come my way, out of my pocket, I sourced the chassis, found original body of a Porsche Kremer K3 body kit from Germany, had it installed in a paint shop, body in white. I put in maybe at the time about $60,000 on just paint and body to get it going. And now I'm kind of in the hole, but if I get this contract later on in a few months, it won't be a problem. Everything will be covered. I'll be good. So I'm supposed to build this car. Well, this gentleman, Phil, got fired from the organization for embezzling company funds, and all his projects were put on hold, including mine. So here I am, sitting with this beautiful Porsche body, no budget, and I'm like, you know what? Let me try and electrify this thing and see what happens. If anything, I have a cool-looking car that's a piece of junk, but let me just try it. So I reluctantly started building this car electric. I started reaching out to some peers who are other engineers in the electric arena. Michael Bream from EV West. Started talking to some of my friends at Hyundai, at Karma, that was kind of local to us. They did a lot of electrification and hybridization as well. And some people were treating it like black magic. Other people kind of came to my rescue and helped me understand what I need to do. I made so many mistakes, bought so many components over and over again, just made so many mistakes, but learned from it. And gentlemen, when I was done, I think it took me about 11 months, so much wiring, more wiring I've ever done in my life. The first time I drove it in the back of my shop with half the battery power, by the way. I had 2 battery packs, 16 kilowatt hours in the rear, 16 in the front, totaling about 1,200 amps. At about 700 amps, I just drove in the back of my shop, and guys, I almost urinated on myself.
The
It was
torque.
the most
The
amazing.
torque.
I was like, what the heck? I drove this thing, like, and I called my team out. You drive it. You drive. Everyone was like, what? And so here's the thing. It was ridiculously fast. And then it wasn't quiet because the engine compartment in this Porsche has no partition between the rear and where you sit. So it had this supercharger whine to it that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then I felt a little more connected to the road. My feedback from the brakes, from the tires, you can hear the pebbles hitting the bodywork. It's almost like my internal, I've been race cars for years. It's almost like my internal combustion engines were dampening for my feedback.
Yeah.
But this was just this crazy whine, but I felt more connection to the tarmac. It was weird. Finished the car, went testing on I couldn't use street tires. I used these Toyota RR slicks. My 0-60 was 206.
Holy.
And I'm like, oh my goodness. And overnight, gentlemen, I went from a someone who was totally against it, someone who just hated EVs, to an advocate overnight. And I posted my findings on all the socials, on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and people started asking questions, and I started getting calls like, hey, I have an old VW bus. Hey, I have a Porsche 930. Oh, I have a 912. I have 911. And I started getting a lot of business, people wanting me to do this. And that's how I transitioned from hardcore, small displacement, high RPM, high compression Hondas, twin turbo Porsches into electrification. And now, if you come to my shop, we do a both, but you'll see 8 out of 10 cars in my facility are all electric conversions versus what I used to do a lot with internal combustion cars. So
That's
a little bit of a mix,
so
and it's
crazy.
been great. So now we find this opportunity where people have these cars that have either historical or sentimental value to them, old Rolls Royces, old Bentleys, old Caterhams, 356 Porsches. And they come to us, and one thing that my team and I hang our hats on is when you sit in any of our creations, you don't know you're in an electric car. When you sit in that VW bus from 1958, you can't tell just sitting in. It has a shifter, it has the gauges, looks factory, key turns on like normal. You don't have a ton of switches. It smells like an old bus, feels like it, but you step on the throttle, it's 450 horsepower, 510 pounds for the torque. It is the most terrifying thing in the world. It is a bus shouldn't be that fast. It should. Customer wanted more power. I'm like, nah, let's just stay here. It's just great stuff. So we're keeping cars on the road. And in California, especially with emissions, it's a little tougher for us. But with electrification, we can do whatever we want. So now I have this slew of cars in my arsenal and slew of clients who are just happy. And by the way, a majority of my customers came to me nowadays, I guess in the office now, to twin turbo or upgrade their camshafts or something. I give them the keys to the pink one. Hey, drive this around. Let me know what you think. And they come back like, shut up and take my money. They want to do that. Like it's ridiculously, gentlemen. If you're ever in LA, don't take my word for it. Come drive it. You will freak out. It is.
Oh no, I'm
stuff.
definitely coming. I'm going to make a special trip to LA just for that.
So cool.
We are coming.
That's awesome.
That sounds good. Thank you.
So let me ask you, just kind of looking down the road 5 to 10 years. I mean, right now, if you look at the landscape of production, if we talk F1 still on the hybrid model, right. NASCAR is still combustion engine, but they have switched to fuel injection. On the street, right. We've got EV, we've got hybrid, we do have the combustion engine, but there's a lot of talk about green fuels or renewable fuels. Where do you see, what does the car industry look like in 5 to 10 years in the landscape of either EVs, biofuels, renewable fuels? What's your thoughts on that from a commercial perspective?
That's a great question. And that would have, if you asked me this question about a year ago, my answer would be different from what I have today. Because a year ago, I would have thought, because of mandates and what we've seen happen in China, that it will be a majority of EV applications, all across the globe. Nowadays, my thought has changed because consumers are really very vocal on their thoughts and what they want to buy, and their buying decisions also dictate as well. I see EVs continue to grow and do well. I see internal combustion still being around, but I see cleaner fuels like everything from biodiesel to ethanol based fuels to synthetic fuels having a very strong hold. I see a lot more hybridization because I see people feel more comfortable with something that's more hybrid than jumping full fledged EVs, especially if they are in multi dwelling homes, in apartments, in places that are somewhat rural, or if they do some towing. Something I've seen a lot of interest in, including coming from myself, is hydrogen.
Yep.
So I see the future also having a nice chunk of the market explored by either hydrogen fuel cell technology,
Yep.
where you use hydrogen to combust to create electricity, and or an opportunity where hydrogen is used as a combustible fuel, where you still may have oxides of nitrogen that exist that are not great for our environment, but it allows for a lot more range, for a lot more towing. And you can still, for those individuals who want the sound and vibrations of internal combustion, you can still experience that using hydrogen as a combustible fuel. The E-Rev, it seems to be a hot topic here at the show I'm in Vegas, where it's a hybrid setup, like the Scout Motors is doing that, where it's an electric vehicle. The car has all the benefits of the torque, acceleration, and lack of, how should I say, maintenance that you see with an EV. However, it has this petrol engine as a range extender.
Mm-hmm.
And the petrol engine is set up in such a way where it kind of exists most of the time at peak torque or peak efficiency to give you as much electricity as possible and keep things going. It's seamless and extends your range significantly, and you can tow.
Yeah.
So I see a future, gentlemen, there's no better time to exist as an enthusiast because
Sure.
we have so much at our disposal.
Yeah.
Electric cars, internal combustion, hybrids, hydrogen opportunities. It's a great time. And for people like us who are into motorsports and building and design, it's like the gold rush. It's amazing.
Yeah.
It really is like the wild west for us. It's wonderful.
You had mentioned Porsche. Correct me if I'm wrong, but did Porsche partner with Repsol, or do they have their own clean fuel that they're working on? I feel like they have like a racing division that is
Yes.
centered around that clean fuel. Is that right, or am I dreaming?
That is correct. No, you are correct. Porsche does have their own. They did a little bit with BP, British Petroleum, a few years back, but it kind of pivoted and doing their own thing with synthetic fuels. And initially, from the data I saw, the caloric content of the initial fuel they had wasn't as good as refined gasoline. In other words, let's say you filled up a tank of a Porsche 911 and you're making 300 horsepower with a regular fuel. You add the synthetic and you're making 280.
Okay.
That was kind of what was happening. But nowadays, I think they added some oxygenates and olefins, and they have now exceeded the caloric content of today's combustible standard fuel, whether you look at 91 or 93. So that being said, some good things are happening to feed the need of those individuals. But it hasn't stopped OEM partners from continuing to invest heavily into electrification, because it seems that, especially in the advent of newer battery technologies where we're going more solid state and semi-solid state, we have no challenges with fires based upon thermal runaway. We have a lot more safer compounds, lighter, more energy and power density batteries. Things are going to be lighter, faster, better, and more cost effective. So I really see that happening very soon. And for electrification to be really reign supreme, where the others won't go away, they'll still be around. That's my perception.
Yeah, so the automotive industry for me, not only is it dear to my heart from a enthusiast perspective, but my company, Tunco, we are involved in the tungsten industry. And so tungsten, whether it's the ICE where we're using tungsten to create the engine block to turn parts, or it's Mallory that goes into the or to the crankshaft for weights and other things, as the ICE demand goes down, that means there's less demand for tungsten. But in the new energy side, like there's a group out of Japan that's working with a group out of Germany where they're starting to put tungsten in batteries, kind of in place of cobalt.
Yes.
It's actually a little bit more stable than cobalt. The company is called Nyobolt, and essentially what that does is it gets you more battery life, so you're going to get more cycles out of the battery, and you're also going to get more range out of the battery. It holds its charge a little bit better. So all this whole concept is fun for me, but it's also important for me from a business model as well because of tungsten.
Of course.
What would you say, BC, is the biggest hold up? Because a lot of the big automakers, have kind of declared an electric future for their brand. What would be, and then in the last maybe year or two, there's been a few articles of people who've tried to do long road trips, right, in an electric. What's the holdup from a broader adoption of some of this? Is it infrastructure? Is it range on the batteries? What would you say to that from your point of view?
From my point of view, I'll say it's twofold. Infrastructure is one, definitely. But secondly is, I guess, education, because a lot of people tend to hold on to a lot of myths or things they've heard. And I was guilty of that myself, and just perpetuate that and hold on that that's what it is. I get those questions about, oh, the grid can't handle it. Why would I buy an electric car when the grid is not? In fact, batteries that are, as a result, more cost-effective batteries as a result of massive electrification has helped the grid by allowing for more storage opportunities by the major companies. And above and beyond that, if there are concerns about grid use, crypto mining and even AI is way more detrimental than we never see with gas with the BEV vehicles, or electric vehicles, battery electric vehicles. But as you talk to people, especially nowadays, which is so sad, we're starting to see EVs being politicized, which is quite unfortunate, because some people feel like, oh, if you're for this party, you're for EVs, and for this party, you're anti-EV. It's kind of weird. I don't get that. The more we can do to get people exposed and just have them drive it, and I've seen that myself, the more that we can have an opportunity to appreciate it and have more sales. And above and beyond that, the infrastructure has to improve. Even me coming to Vegas, I don't know if you're aware, but there've been a lot of fires in Southern California, a lot of winds and so on and so forth. So it's very, very windy. I drove a Honda Prologue, which gets about 279 miles. My trip here was a little over 200, but I did have to pull over to charge once because the winds were so massive. It's like I was driving to a headwind, and it was stealing range from me. It was just destroying it. Same thing that would happen with a gasoline car. I use more fuel. But I still had to stop, fast charge, and it took me about 38 minutes. Went to go use the restroom, grab some snacks. By the time I came back, it was good to go. So it is something you have to plan a little bit, but as infrastructure improves, as more manufacturers start adopting the NACS or NACS that Tesla uses, because their infrastructure is amazing, they're everywhere, I think it'll make it a lot easier for people and remove range anxiety from their mind. And by the way, it's also an American thing. I barely drive more than 30 miles a day when I go to work, from work to home. I don't use that much. It's only once in a while that I travel far to Vegas or Northern California or out of state. And just when I do that, I just plan accordingly and I'm good to go. So it's not really a challenge.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very, very good explanation. I think we're definitely Westerners, but Americans, we tend to be set in our ways about what we like. It's not really that big of an inconvenience. It's just a different lens, a different way of seeing how we travel, how we commute, things of that nature. And BC, that is a very interesting point. I mean, we support AI and crypto, and I don't think the average person understands the demand that is putting on the power grid. And that's actually probably, if you were going to have a discussion on AI, that's the biggest threat on AI, is that we probably don't have enough power to power the demand that's coming from AI.
Even when you have an AI model generate something as simple as a one color picture, it consumes as much energy as a standard refrigerator for 30 minutes. And that's just one picture. And then now with some of the newer phones coming out with AI already embedded in them, and AI is going to become more and more prominent usage and so on and so forth, the demands are astronomical. But also as Americans, we are kind of spoiled here with our fuel prices too. You go overseas to the UK or Germany, fuel is so expensive. I mean, we pay 10 times more there than we do here with gasoline. And so it's easier for us to really embrace internal combustion, continue to, because our fuel prices are relatively cheap compared to some other places in the world. And when overseas, they have those challenges with expense, it actually incentivizes them more to go with, things that are more electric. And
Yeah.
that's why you see countries like Norway completely 100% electric there, even though things are cold and so on and so forth. In the UK, you go there are opportunities for incentives to continue to allow you to travel certain areas. I think in London, there's a congestion charge.
Yep.
You have to pay if you have a petrol car going into Greater London. EVs have a bit of a break. So there's all these incentives. Here in America, we're blessed. We have so many options that we can do whatever we desire. And it's a matter of exposure as far as I'm concerned. You get more, you just to be able to experience it and all the joys. It's really intoxicating how much fun these cars are. And by the way, don't get me wrong. I haven't abandoned the internal combustion. I still build them for customers.
Sure.
We have a few cars in the house now. But on the weekends, when I go to Cars and Coffee or I do some rallies, I tend to gravitate more towards my electric performance EVs. Not putting around, performance.
Yeah.
And we're good to go.
Well, when you're running almost a 2-flat 60-second,
Yeah.
I mean, you're driving a car that's faster than a Bugatti. So let's go. I mean, of course
It's
you're going to take
fun
that,
indeed.
right? So I know you've got a hard stop coming up, but just real quickly, I had somebody whisper in my ear that you may have been to Jay Leno's garage once or twice. What was that like?
Jay is fantastic. I don't know if someone's eclipsed me, but a couple years ago, I think I was the most returned guest on his show. I did 7 shows with him.
Oh, wow.
On both his CNBC opportunities and with his YouTube channels. This chap loves me. I mean, he said, BC, if you build a bicycle, I will drive it. It's just so amazing stuff. He's driven my 1,000 horsepower minivan that I built for American Honda years ago. I still have a lot of fun. He's driven my electric Porsche, which he loved the pink electric 935 so much. He did 2 shows, YouTube and with Reggie Watts, did a CNBC show. He's driven my all-wheel drive sequential gearbox turbo Honda wagon. He's done my twin turbo Porsches. He even in my last episode with him asked me to build a Rolls Royce, which I just finished. So very soon I'm going to show with the Rolls Royce electric that we built, 600 horsepower classic Rolls Royce. Should be a lot of fun. And the guy is just an amazing enthusiast, loves everything from steam to electrification, and knows more. Very brilliant man. Knows more about engine technology than some shop owners that I know. Great guy.
That's awesome. Well, man, it was an honor to speak with you today, and this has been one of my favorite pods that we've had so far.
Thank you.
And we wish you all the best. And you can definitely count on us being in LA to feel some of that electrified horsepower.
You have my invitation. No problem. Thank you.
All right, buddy. Well, you have a great show in Las Vegas. Have a good time.
Thank you.
And as everybody always says, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. So
good.
have
It's
a good
pleasure
time
indeed,
there,
gentlemen. Have a pleasant one.
and remember to be a misfit.
Amen.
All right. Well, this has been another episode with BC, the fastest electric man on planet Earth. Have a good day.